Your presence matters. But there's a second plus that I would like to suggest that we can turn in this hour, and that is we can turn to the comfort that we find in our memories. To that end, we're just going to take a few moments here at the beginning of the service, and we're going to take the time to share some thoughts and some memories about her life. Elizabeth is going to come first, followed by David, and after they've had the chance to share, we're going to open the floor for some other comments behind that. So if you'll come and get us started.
I need a microphone, I'm not loud enough.
Laughing. Her journey's just begun, author unknown. Don't think of her as gone away, her journey's just begun. Life holds so many facets, this earth is only one. Just think of her as resting from the sorrows and the tears in a place of warmth and comfort where there are no days or years. Think how she must be wishing that we could know today how nothing but our sadness can really pass away. And think of her as living in the hearts of those she touched, for nothing loved is ever lost, and she was loved so much.
All righty then. You did
Sorry.
it. You did it. I didn't think she had it in her. I thought they could totally fall
It's
apart.
Deborah's fault with the music.
Again, I'd like to, on behalf of my family, thank everyone for being here. I've talked a lot with my mother over the years, and we even talked about when this day came on her funeral wake, that she didn't want it to be a really big sad occasion. You know, she would like us to celebrate her life. If it was up to her, we would have music, we would have dancing, we'd probably have a little wine. I thought that was a really good idea, but my sister Elizabeth put the kibosh on it. So, anyway, I'd like to just spend like 15 minutes talking about my relationship with my mother and a little bit about her history for those of you who didn't know her, although I think most of the people here did. So my mother was born in Brooklyn, and she had an older brother, Johnny, and a younger sister, Sabina, who she loved very much and played with and went to school with, and did all the regular things that a lot of us here did in Brooklyn growing up. When she graduated from high school, she went to work in Manhattan at some of the larger offices, and it was around the time of the end of World War II, so she got to see some of the great ticker tape parades down Manhattan streets. And besides working, on the weekends she liked to go dancing, and that is where she met Carlos. So they started dating, and my mother told me that her mother, strict grandma, did not like my father at all, you know. And I remember we were visiting, my wife and I, down, and my mother was telling me about that, and I just couldn't believe it, because those of you who know my father know him as, you know, very sweet, quiet, just all-around nice guy. You know, how could she not like my dad? And my mother said that Abuela thought he was very, very fresh. And my father was sitting there, she said this, and I remember my dad just sitting there with a little smile on his face. And he was like, I wasn't fresh, I was just a bit feisty. Was it feisty? Yeah, feisty. I still don't know what it meant, but it was funny. So, despite my Abuela's objections, they got married. Unitarian church, small wedding. Her sister Sabina was her maid of honor. And they went off to Cuba for a two-week honeymoon, where they both said that they had a fantastic, wonderful time, which I don't doubt, because 9 months later I was born. My mother spoke of my dad working 2 or 3 jobs to save up to buy a restaurant, which was his dream, and she was a stay-at-home, good stay-at-home mom. Although she did tell me this story once, so I have to pass. This was kind of a shocker to me. She said we had a big, beautiful carriage, and she would ride me around, push me around on nice days, and sometimes she would get home, and it was really nice out, and I was asleep. She would put the parking brake on the carriage and go inside and watch me from inside the building. And I was like, you gotta be kidding me. You left me outside in Brooklyn. Let me think, did the police have everything under control? No. Did we live in like a nice gated community? And no. Like, Mom, what was going on? How could you do this? And she just said very calmly that, well, see, Al Anastasio lived down the block, so there's no problems. I'm like, Al Anastasio, who's that? Anastasio, that sounds familiar. Yeah, he was the head of the Gambino crime family. And basically, Big Al said that there would be no hanky-panky on my block, the surrounding area. And therefore, since Al said there was no hanky-panky, there was no sort of crime, and it was like one of the safest areas in Brooklyn. All right then. I didn't realize, we had our own personal little Martin Scorsese movie story going on there. But what was amazing is just how calmly, she would talk about that. So anyway, I'm growing up. I'm jumping in. I'm like 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 years old. The one thing I remember is, with my mom and dad, the biggest thing was, food and music. They loved it all. Growing up in New York, getting to see the symphonies, the ballets, the Broadway plays that they would bring me to. And of course, my favorite would be the Christmas show at Radio City Music Hall with the Rockettes. Even at home, there was very little TV. It was always music playing. It was my dad listening to Spanish classical music or flamenco music, and my mom listening to classical music and Broadway plays. When we did watch TV, it was Mom introducing me to all her favorite movies and her favorite actors and actresses, people like Spencer Tracy, Gary Cooper, Jimmy Stewart, Audrey Hepburn, Katharine Hepburn, Betty Davis, and the likes. And one of the most vivid memories I have growing up is going to the movies with her, to the new movie in the theaters, West Side Story. It was in Breezy Point. And after the film, which we really loved, music of Leonard Bernstein, and just a great all-round movie about New York that we loved, my mother challenged me to a race home. And she said that there would be no running, we would only be skipping. And I was about 8 years old, and I was on. I took off, and I'm going, and my mother was just there, side by side, looking down at me, laughing. And I was just skipping and skipping as fast as I could go, and she just stayed right along next to me. And it just started getting funny. I just couldn't pull ahead. And we started laughing, and we laughed, and we laughed, and we just kept going further and further and laughed till the tears were coming down. And I remember when we finally got home, my mother kneeled down and gave me a big hug. And I remember very clearly thinking of how much I absolutely adored her and how great she was. I practiced this. It's hard to tell. I didn't cry. All right. So, yeah, she's fantastic. Loved her. So it was around this time that she created a book club with some of her best friends. Judith Darce, your mom, of course, was there. And they called it the NBC or NBC Club. And what they did is they all rotated going to each other's houses. And anyway, since it was girls' night out, the one rule they had was that they wouldn't need to dress up and they did not have to wear any makeup. And this was not a problem at all because, for you guys, you know that the NBC Club stood for the Natural Beauties Club. And they would get together and have a lot of laughs. I remember my mother, when she would host it, she would bring out all sorts of hors d'oeuvres and all the fancy dishes, and there'd be nice cheeses and little triangle sandwiches. You had the Spanish chorizo, of course, and glasses of wine, and the one thing I did notice that I never saw there were any books. But this did not seem to deter the fun that they had. These women were tons of fun. I mean, lots of laughs. Even when I was 8 years old, I would go down and just had a great time with them. They were very funny. Very funny. So, jump ahead a couple of years. I'm 12 years old. And one day my mother asked me to, my opinion, on whether or not I'd like to have a brother or sister join the family. And I knew right away, I explained to him that one, things were going perfect as they were. I was an only child, less problems. I was an angel. And I had proof, I have photos to prove that. I was an angel, and they were like 40 years old, much, much too old to be having more children. And, as I was making my argument before I knew it, there was Joni. And 2 years later, there's Elizabeth. And I was worried about how I'd feel about these intruders. But as it turns out, I fell in love with them right away, and they were a lot of fun, and they were really cute. And I found that there was another added bonus, that my mother would now finally have someone else to dress up. She could concentrate on these two cute little girls, and I would finally end my reign as her dress-up Ken doll. And I could finally maybe start choosing my own clothes and possibly get those belt-bottom polka dot pants I had had my eyes on for a while. So, anyway, there's my sisters going through the same thing, learning about music and art and movies, and I got to sprinkle in a little of the Beatles on top of that. And within a couple of years, I'm a junior in high school, and I went to my mother and told her I had an idea of redecorating my room. And she asked me, what did I have in mind, and I said that I would like to paint my walls a flat black, and all the trim in red, and maybe have some like dark red or black curtains, You saw it. She's looking at me like I'm crazy. She saw it. It was beautiful, 99% of moms would have said, absolutely not. Connie said, go right ahead. And I did it. And again, people looking at it, they're saying, that sounds really awful. And some of you said, they're thinking, there's something wrong with that kid. There's something wrong with him, definitely. But I painted the walls black, and I got my posters. I had like a black background. So that when they were up there, looked like the paint was on the walls. Look, I don't know, look at Doris and Jude. They're shaking their heads. I'm using the Dayglow paint, doing my Peter Max hand-drawn things on the black walls, and my 48-inch black light, and it was like a hippie paradise. And I think most moms would have kept that locked, that my door locked. Nobody would have saw it. But Connie made sure that anyone, whether she had one visitor or a party of 20, she would proudly show them my room, and she just loved it. And so did I think. Maybe they were lying. No, but she was very proud. I mean, we could not have a plumber come to fix the drain without him seeing my room before getting started work. So I think it was like that kind of support that she gave me through my life, as far as creative ideas, being a free spirit, that was really gave me the courage to go out and try to make it as a photographer, which I did, as opposed to getting a real job. And I thank her very much for that. So shortly after, I moved away, went off to college, never really came back to live in New York again, but I don't think a week went by where I did not speak to my mother and have a conversation about what new movies were out, what had gone on that week, and of course we love to talk politics. And I've been making those phone calls right up till the present day, and she has always been like one of my greatest confidants, and even in my 40s, 50s, 60s, I would still call my mother for her advice, and I'm going to really truly miss her being there for me. And anyway, moving on, my parents moved to Ridgewood for a short period, where my mother at the age of 50 got her college degree, which is pretty awesome. And then they decided to move down here to Florida, which I blame on Jen and Joe, I think, because my best friends came down here. And of course all New Yorkers come down here eventually, I hear. But anyway, my dad sold the restaurant, and they, along with my sisters, came down here, loved it. My sisters are still here. They've finished school here, both got married. My sister, Joni, and Kelly. Hi, Kelly. She's not going to wave to me. There you go. And John. Hey, John. And they, like I said, they loved it down here. I moved to Chicago about 25 years ago, from New York to Chicago. And I've always been kind of a city person, and always pictured my parents as city people, so I just could never understand them loving, why they loved being down here, what was going on that they loved it. I knew that my mother and father didn't play golf, and I know Connie don't surf. So I asked them once, what is it that they do down here? And this is what she said. But she loved being by her children and her grandchildren. She worked at the Brevard Community College, at the King Center for the Performing Arts, also volunteering there and getting to see a lot of the biggest shows that came through here. They were able to see through that. They belonged to Satellite Beach Women's Club, the AARP. She worked with voter registration and was a poll worker during elections. She was with the Holmes Regional Auxiliary, whatever that is. Spanish American Club, the Brevard Apple Corp. I don't know what that is either. American Culinary Club, and of course the Moose Club, amongst other things. And I probably missed a couple as she was going through this long list of things that they did. And when she was done, I remember looking to Michelle and thinking, we've really got to step up our game. These two old people are really making us look bad. But anyway, that's the way my mother and father were. I mean, they lived life to the fullest, and I only wish that Michelle and I can also learn to live life to the fullest, and that we love each other with a passion that my mother and father did. Thank you.
Now, who has the courage to speak now? Tremendous. Good. Maybe instead of coming to the podium, if you would like to share just a quick word or a short story or just a thought about Connie, about her life, maybe this just from right where you're seated, if you would speak up, I believe we could hear you. If anybody else